Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on how to write a good brief when working with influencers. My name is Alistair Wheat, I'm the Head of Product here at Analytica, and I'm delighted to be joined for today's session by three excellent FinTech influencers. We have Chris Richards, who you can find at FinTech Ed on Twitter. We've got Elizabeth Lumley at LizLum and Chris Gledhill. And we're going to be talking both about how to write a brief, but also about how to partner with influencers. What are the sort of things that brands need to think about when working with influencers, and how influencers can bring value to brands, and also what influencers can get out of working with a brand. So first of all, I'll introduce the three speakers in a bit, three panelists in a bit more detail. So first of all, Chris Richards. Chris is the Global Marketing Manager at Rise, a division of Barclays. And Chris has been working at Barclays Group in the Innovation Office, and he oversees the social media strategy and platform content delivery for its 6 FinTech accelerator ecosystems that are spread around the globe. So Chris has taken his love for influence marketing and networking and begun championing this across Barclays teams to educate and skill up teams on the importance of influencers and how to best utilize these relationships. So Elizabeth Lumley, at LizLum, you can find her on her blog as well, which we'll share at the end. And Liz is the Director of Content and FinTech Ecosystems at VTC Innovations and FinTech Talents. So she's been in the space for over 20 years and is a global specialist and communicator on services, regulations, risk, data and technology investment, retail, and global technology banking. It's a bit of a tongue twister, that. She's internationally recognized as one of the leading voices in FinTech and banking technology innovation, and she's well established as a global conference speaker and conference organizer, so lots of experience both in digital influence work and physical events. Chris Gledhill, finally, is the co-founder and CEO at Seco. Chris is a global FinTech influencer and often speaks and writes about FinTech banking and the future of financial services. So Chris was the lead mobile architect and led the disruptive innovation labs at Lloyds Banking Group before becoming CEO and co-founder of the FinTech startup Seco. So Chris has both a financial and a business background with expertise spanning a wide range of disruptive technologies. So you've got three people who really know their stuff and have done all sorts of different influencer work with various brands. Just to kick off as a bit of an icebreaker for the three of you, just to introduce yourselves a bit more, I'd love to know from each of you 2 topics that you particularly love talking about as an influencer, and also 1 topic that you're bored of, that if someone comes to you and says, hey, can you do a webinar or talk on this particular topic, you'd say, oh, please, not that one anymore. So Chris Richards, do you want to kick us off then with your sort of 2 favorite topics and maybe 1 topic that you're a bit bored of?
Yes, no problem. Again, thanks for having us on today, and welcome to everybody listening. So 2 topics that I love talking about. Obviously, the influencer marketing piece, given that I'm on this call, but I suppose mainly for me, it's looking at the psychology of social media and sort of the art of human hacking. So I find this really interesting, what makes people tick, what makes the engagement of social media work, and the psychology behind it. So always happy to talk about sort of a mixture of those 2 topics around influence and the deeper psychology behind it. A fascinating topic. Something that if I hear again anytime soon, I'm sick to deck off, and I'm sure this will be the same, is the word GDPR. It's been bandied around on everything I see online, on most posts and in most conversations. It's kind of interesting from a social media perspective, but it's one of the things that I'm kind of currently sick to death of actually hearing about, and just want it to kind of be done with now. So probably they're my 3 things.
I'm sure you're not the only one. So thank you for that. Liz, how about you?
Wonderful. I mean, I was going to be a bit cheeky and just say open banking for everything, but I'm actually going to take a bit more and talk about this a bit more concisely. The 2 things I love talking about, and really I do love talking about open banking because I think it's probably the most interesting, disruptive, and there's going to be a lot of intended and unintended consequences in this era of open banking that financial services and fintechs are in right now. And it's a real opportunity for a lot of players in the space to examine what the possibilities are. So I do love that. The second thing I love talking about is really, I'm going to say diversity and inclusion. And I know you're not supposed to use those words anymore because it puts some people off. But, I mean, I've been a woman in this industry for 25 years. And it really kind of fits into the job that I'm doing now at FinTech Talents, because to talk about diversity and inclusion is really a talk about talent. And we talk to a lot of FinTech companies and a lot of banks, and there is a search for talent, for quality people to come and work in this industry. And the key to talent is to look in as many pools as possible for the quality people and the interesting people and people who are creative and imaginative to come and work at your company. And there are strategies and there are tools and there are ways to access those different pools, which because you hear a lot from companies wringing their hands saying we're not getting people of color applying to our company, we're not getting women applying to our company. Well, you need to look at your strategies, because there are strategies to change that, so when you think about talent, I mean, if I want to hire people, I want it to look in as many pools as possible and find the best people, and that's how you find the best people to join your company. If you just look at the same pool, then you're not going to get the best people. And so probably the thing I don't want to talk about anymore, and I'm going to bring up open banking again, but it's really more about lazy FinTech talk. The number of times I have seen a presentation on, FinTech, is it a threat or opportunity? It's just so incredibly lazy, and it's not the way to think about the industry. It's this sort of bank, FinTech, us and them mentality is so old-fashioned, and it's not in the true spirit of what open banking is supposed to be. So I don't want to talk about any topics in FinTech where the people who are putting together the event or the webcast haven't actually thought about the topic in hand and are going to sort of meaningless buzz phrases. That makes me not happy at all. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Chris Gledhill, finally, what are your two favourite topics and one you're bored of?
Okay, so one topic I love to talk about is the future of money. I could talk for hours and hours and hours. Whenever I do an interview and someone says, oh yeah, what's the future of money beyond Bitcoin? I could just talk forever. I love that. I particularly love it in relation to influencer marketing as well, because I'm fascinated by how do you quantify the value of influence, and not just for sort of macro and micro influencers, but actually for everybody. So this whole topic fascinates me completely. I read up so much about it. So I love it if anybody asks me about where the concept of money is going and how that sort of ties in with the value of individuals beyond their financial value. Probably the other topic is anything to do with like really disruptive technology. So anything about quantum computing or advancing your networks. I'd love to get a bit of deep dive into that, not just kind of for the geeky sense of it, but trying to apply it to what's going on at the moment in terms of various angles of business and financial services, and seeing how does it change how we do things. So if suddenly you have, for example, a concept of, I don't know, like quantum banking. So if instead of your wealth being a single state, it could exist in infinite number of states at any particular point in time, how does that change the game, and what does that actually mean for how we view banking at the moment? So I'd love to get to go completely blue sky crazy on any of those kind of topics. In terms of stuff I don't like to talk about, so Elizabeth kind of stole my thunder on one of those, because I had the kind of same thing. I was going to talk about this lazy FinTech talk, so any of this kind of...
I'm sorry, Chris.
That's okay. I was rapidly scribbling, thinking I need to think of something else. Because I was going to do, I really hate it when people start talking about, should we work with FinTechs or against FinTechs, These kind of discussions are so kind of 2015. It's just really annoying, and I think we've realised that it's so much more complex than that. There's so many more nuances than it's just like banks versus FinTechs. So I'll go for the other easy one, and I'll say I don't like to talk about blockchain anymore. If you asked me like 2 years ago, I would have loved it, but I'm kind of getting quite bored of it, to be honest. And I think unless it's something that's looking at moving the ball forward a bit in terms of where we're going with digital ledger technologies, I don't want to just talk about, could we use blockchain for exporting bananas in a more efficient way to Colombia or something, right? I'm not bothered about that. Or, can we use blockchain to score some PR points for some brief period of time? I really don't want to talk about that either. So, yeah, blockchain I don't want to talk about at the moment.
Yeah, I've seen a few companies in our space doing stuff with, their own kind of cryptocurrency and doing their own sort of ICOs and stuff like that. And I think it seems often to be more of just a kind of PR exercise just to get a bit of coverage rather than actually being something useful. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you mention that that's a bit of an overused topic as well, Chris. So thanks for those very interesting and revealing topics that you've picked, whether it's your favourites and the ones that you're getting bored of. I'm surprised no one mentioned Brexit as a topic they're bored of, although we're probably bored
I think
of that as
everyone is tired of Brexit right now, so that's
Yeah.
a given. We don't need to mention it.
And it's not going away anytime soon either. So it'd be really good actually to find out a bit more about how you guys actually work with organizations as an influencer, and you know those could be brands or they could be event organizers. So I just want to find out with each of you, why do organizations work with you as an influencer? What's the value that you feel that you bring to the table, and what are the specific things that sometimes they'll ask you to do? Liz, do you want to kick us off with that one?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, usually when I get asked by a brand to come and work with them, it's to do something. So, for example, I did some work with my old company with MasterCard, where I was embedded on their stand at Mobile World Congress, and so I made sure that we did, videos and blogs with their people, and attended all the sessions that their executives were at, and tweeted and do work like that. Most recently at Money 2020, Verifone had me come in and do a Twitter Q&A with their president of EMEA, and that that topic was about women in tech and that in entrepreneurism. So it's usually brands. I mean, I come in to do something with them, and they know I have a certain sort of presence in the industry and a significant Twitter following. So I'm not just some sort of 24-year-old intern tweeting. It's Liz Lumley tweeting at this event, or doing a live blog, or doing a video. So that's usually how I, in the past, have tended to work with brands who have come to me.
Cool, thanks. And Chris Gledhill, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I think what's kind of interesting is brands kind of reach out to work with me because I have an external influence, but also they're quite keen on me influencing internally within the organizations. And this is quite a new thing where they have large organizations, say 100,000 people, and they're quite keen for me to come in and give a talk, like a TED-type talk or whatever, to their senior leadership team or to their innovation team or their products team or whatever, and kind of influence and I guess inspire what they're doing. So they kind of help me as kind of an external expert talking internally to try and sort of shake things up a bit or do some new ideas. And the other one, kind of following on from that, they're quite keen to have me as an influencer for some of their events to quite often pick my brains or judge a competition or review a hackathon or filter their innovation dashboard. Quite often I'm kind of brought in to do that, and then with the understanding that I'll be publicising and tweeting and broadcasting and saying very good things about whatever the winners are for their particular competitions. There's quite a lot of that kind of stuff happening, this kind of getting external influencers in to kind of influence the internal organisation. And I think
I'm sorry, go on, Chris. I was going to add something to you with what you were saying.
Yeah, and it's also from my experience in large organisations, there's something of a mystique about getting an external person in. They're not just like, it's Brian from accounts or whatever coming to talk about something. They're like, oh yeah, we've got this external person coming in to talk, and it's kind of, you get a bit more attention when you come in as an external party to come and talk internally to senior leadership teams.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I wanted to just sort of an addition to what Chris was saying. That there is often you're brought in to do like a keynote presentation or to talk to the board. To usually give sometimes like different levels of. Can you come in and talk about the history of FinTech, or can you talk about who are the top startups to look at where at the moment, or give like an overview of open banking. But it was just because Chris mentioned judging hackathons or judging startup competitions. And I judge a lot of startup competitions, and I know not all of them are physical, but I've got a little bit of a pet peeve on that. It's kind of that symbiotic relationship that influencers kind of get known by doing things in public, like they get on stage, they write blogs, their name is there. And there's a few sort of organizations that sometimes ask you to judge a startup competition, and then it's never made public that you are one of the judges. And I usually don't charge to be a judge, but like my payment is my name and my picture gets up as someone who is a judge for the startup competition. So I think a lot of brands need to sort of understand the personal brand of the influencer that they're dealing with, and give them a little bit back for working with them, so that you don't get taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's certainly something I want to come back to in a bit more. Is what's what's in it for the influencer. So I'll come back on that point, Liz, and expand. It'd be interesting to hear all three of you expound on that. Just going to you, Chris Richards.
Yeah.
Because you're an influencer in your own right on fintech and marketing and other topics. So I'd be interested to know your answer to the question of what do you bring to the table, but also you're at a brand and you're looking to work with influencers as well. So what are the sort of things that when you're looking to work with influencers, you try to find influencers to help you with?
Yeah, so slightly different angle for me coming at this without kind of the background experiences that Chris and Elizabeth bring to the table. So obviously working for Barclays, I suppose I'm almost a bit like the influencer API for the bank, in that I'm connecting with influencers personally and kind of building those relationships on a personable level, but seeing those opportunities lie internally for stakeholders. So to Chris's point, having Chris in recently at Rise London to be part of our podcast or coming to one of our events and tweeting about it is, really key stuff to change the mindset and plant those seeds within the firm. And as Chris said, it's kind of I suppose that starstruck idea of having somebody external that holds a lot of gravitas in the industry to bring them in, to talk with them. It really makes internal think differently about what they're doing. So for me, it's really about championing the way we connect with influencers and changing the mindset that it's not a business relationship as such. It's not like we'll send an email, we'll talk to an influencer, we'll get them in to do something and pay them. It's more around the personable approach, and really understanding what these guys and ladies are doing in the space and what makes them tick and getting them involved. So I sort of see myself in the middle of that space, playing within the influencer field myself, and I call it playing because that's the way that I feel that I've kind of fallen into it, but then it's become something bigger than that from more of a corporate sense for me, and really kind of channel that back into Barclays. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and to be working with people like Liz and Chris is fantastic as well.
Yeah, great. So the title of the session is how to write a good brief, and I will be coming on to that. But I wanted to spend a bit more time just for people who may be not familiar. I've never done this before, just to understand a bit more about what actually engaging with influencers looks like, and before we get more to the specific thing of what a good brief looks like. I just want to spend a bit more time expanding on that point you raised, Liz, of what's in it for the influencer, and how what do brands need to think about when they're doing all this? Is why is the influencer going to bother doing this? You talked about the recognition piece, so maybe Liz, you could expand on that a bit more. And obviously sometimes there may be payment involved, but if there is payment, what is the payment for exactly? And if it's not payment, what are the other things that you value in terms of working with a brand and giving up your time to do so?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, when especially when I was an independent consultant, if I get asked, say for example, to go to Dubai to do a 45-minute keynote, there's going to be a fee I need for that. That's kind of insulting to think that I would do that on my own dime when there's nothing in it for me. So I kind of look at engagements on several levels. Is it a brand I respect that want me to be involved with something, like be on a panel at a show or do a webcast? Would it represent like a business opportunity for me? Would it be good for my personal brand, or is there a fee involved? So to do some sort of workshop or a talk or consulting. So you look at those three levels. So not everything has a fee attached, but it kind of depends. I wouldn't just, a company I didn't know and I'm not sure why they're calling me, I wouldn't necessarily go sit on a panel. I give the example a bit. I really kind of consider myself in FinTech like a bank person, and I often get asked, because I'm a woman, to be on like an insurance panel, because they can't find women to speak, which is bull. And I tend to say, I'm not the best person to talk about insurtech. I can do it in a general way, but there are plenty of other people who are much more knowledgeable about insurance than I am. So I wouldn't necessarily jump at any opening or any envelope that's pushed in front of me. It has to be connected to the things I talk about. So it would be something to do with banks. It would be something to do with startups. It would be something to do with innovation and entrepreneurship. It would be those topics that fit in with my personal brand that I would go and do.
Thanks. And Chris Clayton, you were mentioning earlier about some of the stuff you go and do internally within an organization. What are the things that you value in terms of getting involved maybe in a bigger organization and sort of connections that you might make through those engagements?
Yeah, exactly that. So because influencing isn't my only kind of thing that I do, I also try to do startups and other projects. So I'm using the kind of influencer route as a way to kind of open doors and get access behind the scenes to organizations and speak to people you'd never be able to get an audience with normally as a startup. So I find that having so many Twitter followers does get you audiences with a lot of very high up people. So that's totally awesome. I also love doing any kind of influencer project where I'm going to learn something from it. So if somebody says, hey, Chris, do you want to do a behind-the-scenes tour of our innovation labs, and then you can write up what you find or whatever. I love all that kind of stuff because then I might actually learn something that's really cool. I love anything that's kind of to do with any passions or causes that I like. So like Elizabeth was talking about the inclusion, diversity angle, women in technology angle. I love anything to do with championing technology for children, and also anything to do with promoting the UK as kind of ground zero of FinTech awesomeness. So anything that to do with kind of championing the UK, I love to get involved in anything like that. Obviously anything to do with my personal brand. So doing certain FinTech influencing gigs, just because I think just being part of that event or whatever it is will increase my personal brand. And then obviously finally it's the money side of things. So if there's a fee, like Elizabeth was saying, if it's something that's outside of your normal working practice, if you have to go out of your way to go to Dubai or wherever, right? If it's something that doesn't spark your fancy and it's nothing to do with a cause that you kind of like and it's not on your usual commute route, then you kind of expect a fee to cover you for that as well.
Cool. Thanks. So, Chris Richards, then over to you. Again, interested for your viewpoint, both as someone who will be involved as an influencer, but what are the sort of things you've done at Barclays with influencers that you think have been particularly appreciated by the influencers that you're working with?
Yeah, I think the standpoint is looking at the business integrity and the personal values of each person that you're dealing with. As Liz said, you can't expect someone to fly halfway around the world for free just to speak on a panel. So I think there are kind of three things here that I like to think about when looking or dealing with an influencer, and that's the three forms of currency, which is cash, crypto, or kudos. And I think they're the sort of three things that I would like to think that influencers work for. So you've got the kudos part, as Chris Cledhill was just mentioning. Is it something that he's genuinely interested in? Is it pushing our personal brands as influencers? Is that brand by association there? And the brand by association wave in itself is huge. Having a large amount of followers on Twitter, gets you into the private events, maybe the VIP room, gets you in front of the CEO of that company that you wouldn't have usually had the opportunity to do. And then being seen with that brand or that association with that brand, again, it comes back to the reciprocity model that I sent through earlier around the kind of, it's on screen now, that was good. So looking at, the person giving something, feeling indebted by that, whether it's the brand or the influencer, either party making a request and that request being granted. It's almost like, this personal trade of what am I getting from this? Okay, well, there's something really great in it for me. I'm getting to go and see this behind the scenes event of this new innovation center or this new tech product or this new, Galaxy phone or whatever it is that you're trialing. So you feel like you've got this kind of insider thing. And in return of that, I feel indebted because you've given me your product to play with. I want to do something for you. So I think there's almost that old school bartering element of it as well. So for me, it's kind of understanding the psychology again, what makes that person tick, what they're interested in, so cash, crypto, or kudos, three things.
Yeah, cool. So I just wanted to now come on to the kind of key theme here. There's this point of actually putting a brief together. Just a bit about us at Analytica, because some people listening may not know who we are. So we're an influencer marketing platform. We have a software platform that allows people to go and find influencers and identify them on all sorts of different topics and analyze how they interact with each other. And we've got a team of people who will provide insights and analysis reports. But the key thing for us is to help people actually just do all of this influencer marketing work better. And I think there's a lot of confusion around influencer marketing as a topic as a whole. Many people just maybe think of the more kind of influencer advertising model, maybe which you have in a bit more in the B2C space, particularly on Instagram. But all of us on this panel here know that it's way more than that, and I'm sure many of the people listening in will have already appreciated that. But it's this challenge of how do you actually go about maybe formalizing, or should you even formalize a relationship with an influencer in this way? So I want to find out from each of you, what is a good example? You've talked about things that an influencer can offer to a brand and stuff that a brand can do that will be of value to the influencer. But how should, if someone's listening to this and they're actually wanting to get an influencer program started, or they've already got an influencer program started and they need to then expand it, what are the things that they need to do to actually communicate with an influencer about how they want to engage with them? I'd be interested in tips, good examples of a brief. I don't know who wants to pick up that one first. So a good example of what is a good example of a brief, of the sort of things that a brand should do?
Well,
I think Chris sorry, go ahead, Liz. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of furthering on from what was said earlier about sort of cash, kudos, or what was the third one? Cash, kudos, and crypto. Oh, yes. Yeah, well, get paid in Bitcoin. But yeah, it's kind of that, in terms of being formal, I mean, there has to be a reason why the influencer is getting involved with a particular brand. So it might be a fee. You're being paid to do something or to speak or to do something. But also in terms of formulating your personal brand. So if you want this influencer to come and, sit on a panel or be on a webcast, make sure it's very clear how you're going to be promoted, so that you're, come and hear Liz Lumley speak, and she's going to talk about this topic. And then it's that so both of our, because, it's like this symbiotic relationship that, the influencers are not born, they're kind of created through their activity. And that activity needs to be pushed by both sides. So I think really sort of looking at cash or kudos or also like business opportunities. So it's your public brand in the industry. So you are seen as someone who judges startup competitions, who spoke on that webcast, who was at this panel or attended this meetup, and your name is always mentioned by either through conversations or on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or you've got a fee, or you have, I think maybe I'll change it from crypto, what you guys were talking about earlier, this access. I've been given through my career access to CEOs and high-level people at banks and really intelligent, creative people that in some other different career I would never have been able to get in that door. So it's that business opportunity, I think. So I would probably replace crypto and say cash, kudos, and I don't have a K, but some sort of network that I'm building for a business that I might want to do down the road. Connections, cash, kudos, and connections, yes. See, I'm very useful.
So then with the brief, so someone's wants to get an influencer program going, do they need to really try and think through all the things that they as a brand can bring to the table, all these sort of things we discussed, and actually spell that out to the influencer to say, look, we'll put you in touch with these people, or is it just more that the influencer would look at them and say, oh, that's the sort of organization I want to work with? I mean, how much does that stuff need to be kind of said explicitly that, we'll connect you with these people, you better come to these events? When you're getting a brand engaging with you, do you need to see them sort of spelling out that, or do you just make a judgment?
I'm of the mindset that I always assume that people need as much information as possible. I don't ever assume that someone knows automatically, so I always, whenever I send people emails, I would send them full directions on how to get to places and everyone they're going to meet and the exact time they're going to be there. I kind of almost overkill, but never assume someone is automatically psychically going to know the benefit to them. I think it's always worth it to actually spell out what the benefits are, and so you can manage both sides' expectations.
And to still with you, Liz, then, what about the brief being specific about what they kind of want the influencer to do? We were initially thinking of titling this webinar about the importance of being specific, but I know in some cases actually when you're working with influencers, you don't really want to put words in their mouth. You can't tell them what to say, but I know a lot of marketers will be used to maybe working with someone in a paid context and they can tell them what to say. So is this just a tension sometimes between maybe the PR people who are more used to working with journalists and they can't control what they're going to say, they just invite them along and hope they say something right, and they don't, they're never going to tell the journalists what to say, or marketers maybe who are more used to doing it for the paid piece where they tell people what to do?
I'm not sure. I mean, a journalist attending, you can't tell them what to say. I mean, I've never been told exactly what I could say. I mean, like, for example, I take the Verifone example where I did the Twitter Q&A. I mean, I knew the people, I knew the woman that I was going to be with doing the questions, and I knew the topic was going to be women in tech. Other than that, I answered how I wanted, how I personally wanted to answer the question. So I don't think, I mean, to me, dictating what an influencer is going to do is like we talked about on email, you're hiring Kim Kardashian to hold up the bottle of perfume. That's not the world that we're talking about here. And I don't think that I don't think anyone who's worth anything, being given a script to say, I love MasterCard, and that would be just hire an actor to do that. That's not what our roles are.
Yeah. If I can just pop in there on the back of what Liz has said regarding that, almost that endorsement piece of a product. I think there's a couple of different areas here with influencers anyway, and especially from a FinTech perspective. So when Liz says, she doesn't get told what to say, and if she sits on a panel, it's her values, it's what she thinks on the topic, and she won't change that for a journalist or anyone. I think there's two different areas here to look at. I suppose you've got the influencers and their values piece and what interests them, and then there's the corporate lens, which is kind of the area that I come in from, where nothing happens unless there's a brief completed. So unless I, have a brief from a marketing perspective about an influence or about a product or a project we're working on, we can't go ahead with that. So I think there's a difference between panels and almost the product endorsement piece or a piece of content. So looking at what the influencers offer you from that subculture piece. So who are they connected with from a brand network, and how is it good for your brand or business to connect with them to reach those people that you wouldn't usually. So I've got a few examples here from a brief that we would pull together internally when either speaking with an influencer or a project. I think there's some really key points to think about when dealing with something that's more around a content piece of an influencer, whether that's a blog post that they're writing for you, or maybe an Instagram image or something with your product on it. So if I can just quickly shoot through those, I think it might be fairly helpful. So the things that I mainly look at to begin with is, so it would be, what is the product, service, or innovation that the brief is actually about? So what is it that as a company we're looking at when we're dealing with an influencer, to kind of get that formulated before we even start approaching those people who are applicable for that brand or product. What are the business in itself and the brand? What are we trying to achieve? What are kind of the objectives actually out of this influencer activity with connecting with these people? What are we trying to drive from that? Be the second point. Thirdly, what's the key insight here? So what's the delivery piece? What do we actually want to get off the back of this as a brand? A, from the influencer, but B, from the wider brand perspective as well. And what is the one thing we would like the influencers we're working with to say to our audience? The core message. So I know that if I get Chris or Liz here into Rise and there's an event on and they're on a panel, obviously we want them to say how great Barclays is, how great the accelerator program is, and all those sorts of things. So really have in mind what it is that you're trying to drive from that relationship before you actually start to drive it. And I think the real...
Just on that point, do you feel like you need to tell the influencers, please say something nice about us?
No.
Or is it just, that's just kind of, they will if they will, and they hopefully will because, it's...
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to work with, to Liz's point, you're not going to work with a brand that, A, you don't gravitate towards and have some sort of, similar values with, or something you're not interested in. As Chris said, he wants to talk about sort of the future of currency and social currency and things. If it's nothing to do with that, and it's something that he doesn't like, he's not going to go and do it just because somebody's paying him to do it. So I'm not expecting an influencer to come here and lie. I want them to be genuinely passionate about the thing that we're inviting them to do or engage with. So they would naturally want to say that to our audience, but it's finding the right people that connect with the thing and the activity that you're doing that will go and do that off of their own back. And that's the kind of influencers that we like to deal with.
So for me, I think there's this thing going around about influencer relations, so building influencer relationships. Yeah. I think I've had some amusing approaches where I think people have been reading a bit too much into that. So they start approaching it again, we read all your blogs, and we love all your presentations, we've done all this, we've done that, and they're going on forever and ever and ever. And for me, I just want a very succinct brief, like why me as opposed to the other influencers, what is it exactly they need, like what Chris was saying. What is it you're actually trying to achieve here? Is this a PR play? Is it some sort of marketing thing? You're trying to sell something? You're trying to get people through the door? What is it you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Just explain it. And then I want to know, is this the decision maker I'm talking to? So is this the person who's going to make a decision about influence marketing, and do they actually have a budget? Is important to know, not just somebody who's just collecting data on influencers and then they'll say, oh, we'll get back to you and speak to whoever it is. I want to know, is this the actual person who's going to make a decision? And then also I want to know, what's my involvement going to be? What's the timescale and commitment involved? Because quite often I have to fit it into my schedule. So if it's going to be, if I'm going to have to write a 10,000 word essay on whatever, I need to factor that into my timescale. So I need to work out exactly what do they need from me and how soon do they need that. So for me, it's kind of I'm kind of more of an introvert, so I'd rather just kind of cut to the chase about what they're trying to, what the business relationship's going to be, what's the value exchange. I quite like it if they kind of almost do it as like a bulleted, here's what we need, here's what we want, here's what you can do, and here's how much we pay you for, right? And then we can just kind of say, yeah, that sounds good, let's do that.
Yep. So yeah, I wanted to sort of touch on Chris's point about being fully aware of what your engagement is. I mean, it was funny. I got this LinkedIn message today from this woman saying, "Oh, I see you're going to be at the blockchain conference in Dublin. I'd like to meet up." And I'm not going to a blockchain conference in Dublin, and so I have to investigate why she thinks I am, because this has happened to me in the past, where an event company will call me up and say, "Oh, we'd like you as a speaker." And I go, "Okay, I think about it," and all of a sudden they put me up on the website, and it's like, I have not agreed to do anything, and I would like you to take me down. And it's really kind of, it's underhanded, and it happens. It's really strange to think, why would you do that? And it's happened to me about 3 or 4 times, where it's like, I'm not speaking at your event. Please don't tell people I am.
I think, Liz, that's that brand by association piece as well, isn't it? They're piggybacking off the back of your good name and what you do, and from you saying you might do it, they're seeing that as it's an agreement, and they see your face on that poster, and they want to go and abuse that relationship that's just started with you. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, apart from that, as soon as an event does that to me, they're banned for life. I don't. I'm not speaking with you guys anymore. It's just, I think it's underhanded.
Isn't that how they kind of got Live Aid together? Was it Geldof went around telling everyone that someone else was coming, and then they agreed to come? I don't think that system would have worked in an age of social media, because it would have been like Bono going, "Oh, what? I'm going to this conference." No, I'm not. It wouldn't have worked. Someone would have tweeted it before he found out. One point I just want to ask, because it comes up in conversations, is the influencer, the inclusion of other brands, competitor brands, in the conversation. And sometimes we'll see clients say, "Oh, look, we can't work with that influencer because they've said something nice about that competitor, or they're seen as being friendly to that competitor, or if they're working with us, it'd be nice if they say something nice about us. We're not going to force them to say something nice about us, but we absolutely do not want them saying something nice about a competitor." Is that just kind of almost just general etiquette from an influencer's point of view, that if brand A is working, you're at brand A's event, you don't start singing the praises of their competitor, or is it something that the brands themselves need to kind of specify, or is it just kind of a given that that's kind of part of the etiquette of working with a brand, that you don't start singing the praises of the competitors?
I don't think it's part of that at all. So I think if you're hired to do a one-off piece with a brand, then you're perfectly entitled to promote other brands as well at the same time or in the future. But
so in the actual event that you're doing with them?
Oh, in the actual event there and there. Yeah, I think if you're hired for a piece of work, like you're doing a Twitter chat or you're live tweeting something, then it'd be weird to suddenly start retweeting their competitor stuff during that period of time. But I think after that, you're perfectly entitled to go forward. I think if you've gone the extra step and you've moved from being, say, just an influencer to some kind of brand ambassador or something like that, then you are kind of required to therefore just sing the praises of that brand exclusively. But I think, otherwise, for the period of time when you're kind of technically employed by them to be at their event to do whatever, it'd be bad form to start singing the praises of their competitors, unless they just happen to bring out something totally awesome at that exact point in time. But otherwise, just like stick with the brief and stick on topic with who your employer is at that point in time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it depends on the context, really. It's kind of, when I did the work with MasterCard, it was kind of known that meant that there was no mention of the other card company during my period. And then it was actually, they didn't even want me like walking near the booth. It was very strange. But yeah, I mean, but then post that event, then then you can talk to whoever you want. But yeah, you sort of take it in context of the job that you're doing in front of you at the time.
Cool. Just wanted to ask as well, we've talked a bit about good things to do. Any particular things you think are a big no-no, or any briefs that you mentioned a couple of no-nos, for example, trying to say that you're at an event that you're not going to as a big no-no, so hopefully no one will be dumb enough to do that. But any other things that you've seen brands do in terms of trying to engage with you as an influencer, or just other people you've heard of, which you think are really not a good idea?
I've seen something where, to Chris Gledhill's point around, people reaching out saying, I like your presentations, I like your website, I like your blog, I like this, I like that, we've looked through all your stuff, can we, have a chat? And for me, there's a big no-no there about almost like the corporate approach to approaching to an influencer rather than kind of the personal approach. So I think for me that would be kind of one of the bad ones that I would advise somebody, if you are reaching out to influencers as part of a program for the first time, really consider the channels that you're reaching out to them on. Don't just send through your standard corporate email, dear sir or madam influencer, would like you to attend this event. Really think about the way that person in particular would like to be contacted and what channels that they gravitate to. So for me, yeah, probably bad ones, corporate approach via email to influencer, big no-no.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's anything that goes the wrong side of the regulatory landscape for influencer marketing. So the FTC in the US and the Advertising Standards Agency in the UK are very clear on how influencers have to reveal to their audience whether a post is sponsored or whether it's a paid whatever. So any approaches, and I've had these where people are saying, well, you don't really have to say it's a sponsored thing, just write this thing, and just make it like it's just from you, speak from the heart. That's a very quick way to end the influence relationship right there and then. I think it's because influencer marketing is an emerging industry, emerging area, the regulations are rapidly catching up, and I think brands will fall the wrong side of it if they start trying to get influencers to appear to be misrepresenting that they're actually being paid to do things. So I'm very keen on calling out if something's a paid post or paid blog or paid whatever.
So I mean, I think probably one of my pet peeves is kind of asking for more than you originally asked for. I mean, this kind of happened this week with me. A large payments company asked me to speak at their event, and then, which I said yes, and then they called up and basically wanted me to then put together the entire agenda for them and find speakers and organize all that, and which I can do. But I had a conversation with them saying, well, that's a completely different fee. That's more, and they kind of got a little upset that they couldn't get everything they wanted for a very, very tiny fee, which would have been. But this happens a lot, even when you do stuff for free. Sometimes, this happened a couple of years ago. Someone asked me to be on like what we're doing right now, to speak on a webcast, and then 2 days later they said, well, can you get the panel together for us? And it's like, well, that's not my job. That's your job. You've asked me to be a guest on this webcast, and I said yes, and I'm taking an hour out of my day to do it. But it's not my job to then put together your panel for you and put together your topic. So yeah, so asking for more, it being taken advantage of is one of my pet peeves.
So does that mean you're not going to write up the follow-up blog post for this?
I will send you my feedback there.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Just for those listening, we've got some time to answer questions. So you can submit questions through the Bright Talk question panel. So start thinking about your questions now, and feel free to start firing those through, and we'll pick up on those and ask them. But just before we get into the kind of Q&A bit, we've not been particularly focusing on FinTech here, but you guys all know a lot about FinTech as a topic, and it was interesting to hear Liz and Chris Gledhill say at the start that the lazy FinTech bit is one of your kind of pet peeves in terms of topics that you don't want to talk about. And we see a lot of our clients, all sorts of different clients, interested in FinTech as an area to work with influencers, and often what we need to do is go and help people find FinTech influencers And it is a bit of a kind of a lazy hashtag. You get a lot of people putting a lot of stuff out on FinTech. I'd be interested to know from the three of you who work in this space, what are the sort of telltale signs you can see when someone really knows their stuff on FinTech versus someone who just wants to appear like an influencer on FinTech and actually maybe doesn't know their stuff. So any sort of tips that you can share just to separate the real experts from those who are just trying to present themselves?
I think if you end up winning buzzword bingo within 5 minutes, that's a sign. Very true. I mean, if they come out with the oldie but the goodie, there are more mobile phones and toothbrushes in the world, I basically walk out of the room. The phone in your hand is more computing power than was used to get to the moon. That's another one. Airbnb is a hotel without any hotels. I almost get like verbally abusive when I hear that because, banks don't actually own all the money. The cognitive dissonance on that is just usually when they come out with a lot of these stock phrases and, FinTech is a threat or opportunity. I mean, that's just lazy, especially seeing a talk like that in London. In London, which is like the capital of FinTech, you should be having a lot more mature conversations about FinTech than who are these new entrants to the market. You should know who they are. When people actually talk about real stories and talk about failures and talk about experiments and talk about this is the project that we did and this is how it works, that's the stuff that's interesting to me.
Yeah, so for me, you could look at any person's social media feed and quickly ascertain whether they're a genuine FinTech influencer versus somebody who's just kind of playing at the game. And you can tell by whether they're a content creator or a content curator. So if they're a genuine influencer, they'll be creating their own content, they'll be publishing their own blogs, they'll be having their own opinions, they'll be engaging in interesting discussions and disagreeing with people and agreeing with people and just being part of the ecosystem. If they're just playing at the game, if they're more of a content curator, they will just be, their feed will just be full of infographics and...
Oops. Hello? Can you...
Oh, we lost Chris. No, but I agree completely with Chris. There are a lot of people on the FinTech hashtag that are just retweeting people and tagging people, and they're not actually creating content themselves, which is a bit of a clue.
But there's no kind of original content coming from them at all?
Yeah, no, I think I would agree as well, and I'm definitely guilty of this myself. So I have different channels for different reasons, and I think the retweets of the ecosystem, there's the kind of I'll scratch your back culture where if you retweet my post, I'll retweet your post, which I see daily tagged into posts about 8:30 a.m. in the morning with about another 50 influencers that we kind of are guilty of all retweeting everyone's posts. And then LinkedIn for me is very much the area that I'll post my own article pieces. And for me, I think the difference between spotting someone that's real online is very easy. At an event, what I like to see is what I call the FinTech futurist, or the person that sticks their stake in the ground. So to Liz's point, and Chris's, the lazy FinTech people will talk about, should we be challenging this, incumbents, all the usual buzzwords we'd hear. But the person that gets up on stage and says, this is where I think it's going to be, or this is where it's taking us, and this is where I say in 10 years it's going to be, or 5 years, or whatever, and really put their stake in the ground and own that, that's really refreshing, because even if it's not true, the fact that they're thinking of that stuff, they're putting it out there, they're thinking about the future of FinTech, they're not just regurgitating something that they've heard in an office. That for me is a sign of a really interesting person that knows their stuff and is kind of forward thinking about the ecosystem of FinTech and where it can go in the future. So that's probably my main piece that I look for, someone that's talking about that future and not what's just happening now.
Yeah, I mean, to hear that, I agree with that. I mean, but to see those people, you've got to be involved in the industry. And I think as much as I love Twitter, there is a danger of the FinTech hashtag. Is that I know clout is dead and it's good, and there's a lot of these influencer lists. Some of these people on the top are not people that create content, are not people that are building things, are not. They are just people that either bot followers or retweet or tag. And because of the way the algorithm works, they get pushed to the top. And that's not useful for anyone. So, but to know who the influencers are, you've got to go to the events and see these people on stage. You've got to listen to the webcast and the podcast. You've got to, LinkedIn actually sometimes gets a lot more sort of deep engagement I found than my beloved Twitter. But you get sort of a wider, more disparate audience reading some of this stuff. So yeah, and using those types of channels, but really look out people that have a voice, unique voice, and as you said, taking a risk, putting their stake in the ground, and creating content.
I think, Liz, as well, you can look at it a bit like the music industry. You've got your kind of top of the pops, top 10 chart people that are in front of everyone that teeny boppers and people buy. And then you've got the kind of underground bands that really know how to play the instruments and know the stuff that's going on in that subculture scene. And in the way FinTech is very much similar, that there's the kind of, as you said, these people that are appearing at the top of these lists that are working the algorithms. And then there's those that you would only go and maybe see in some, backstreet FinTech blockchain extravaganza event with like 20 people producing a white paper at the end of the evening that really know the stuff and, have played it for ages. And that I find really sexy. That subculture piece is where the true beauty and the genius is happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, I always look at you.
I'm totally going to steal that analogy. Don't worry, I'll tag you in it. But I'm totally going to steal
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. I always do. I always love exactly what you're saying. I like people that stand up and ask a really interesting question. I tend to go immediately and chase down. So not even the people on stage. I've met a number of people that they stood up and asked an intelligent question or made an observation, and I'm like, oh, you're an interesting person, and they're not on any list.
Yeah. And I think that's, because we obviously have a software platform, we're trying to help people find influencers. I think there's obviously going to be always a human element of finding influencers, and not all influencers are going to be on social media. We can only analyze what's actually there in terms of platforms that we can get data from. And it's certainly a challenge for us to pull out the originators of a concept, or the content creators, or the people who are the connectors as well. So yeah, we do our best to try and not just look at the obvious vanity metrics and analyze all the interactions behind the scenes. But yeah, it's always good to get feedback on our lists as to whether they look right to people who actually know the people involved. And we've had conversations with you guys about that as well. So always looking to evolve that. So just got to thanks very much for that chat about the FinTech piece. I want to take a question that we've had through the Bright Talk panel, which is for all three of you. What is the most successful campaign you've ever worked on, and how did you measure that success? This is maybe focusing a bit more on the measurement side. I don't know who wants to go with that one first.
I could probably tell a story that I think probably the social media channel that's most that's least talked about is Reddit, and I think it's more influential than us oldies with gray hair realize. There's a lot of conversations happening on Reddit. So one of the strangest things that happened to me, so Richard Brown, who's with R3, he told me that this was the interview I did with him at my old company was the most important interview of his career when he was with IBM. And it went viral on Reddit. And if I had known this was going to happen, I would have worn a much better outfit. But it did. The video I did with Richard Brown when he was with IBM, it started this huge conversation on Reddit in the blockchain group, and someone made a commemorative T-shirt based on the interview, which I think only me and Richard ever bought. But it became like a big thing. But because of that, Richard became the blockchain guy, and then eventually he went and he's moved over to R3. So I think it's something will catch someone's imagination in a certain channel. But we talk about LinkedIn, we talk about Twitter, but I really think that we should be talking about some of these other channels a lot more. And Reddit is one that there are so many subgroups on it. And I know it gets a lot of mainstream press about, horrible groups, but there's a lot of intelligent conversation happening in some of those subgroups that I think we as an industry should be paying more attention to. That sort of answers the question. That's more of an anecdote than anything else. I think you can still buy the T-shirt if anyone wants one.
I think my answer to the question would be for the successful campaign, we're currently obviously sort of working on that really with Analytica at the moment, and really trying to pull out those KPIs and what the return on investment looks like from an influencer marketing campaign. So maybe next year I can give you the answer to that question, but for the time being, I think it's kind of all to play for, and we're kind of polishing that up with you guys. So looking forward to doing that later this week, in fact.
Okay, great. Chris Gosel, anything to add?
Oh yeah, so I had an interesting one last year. So I was invited to a large bank to speak at their senior leadership offsite day. You know, one of these kind of wine and dining kind of things where they take all their high-level people to go off and talk about banking and fintech and whatnot. So I went and gave this talk there, and my brief was like, can you just go and scare them? Because they're all too complacent. They all think banking's all going to be fine in another 20 years or 30 years, whatever. So just go and like scare the pants off them, right? So I went along and I sort of painted a picture of where banking could go and kind of gave a reasonable roadmap to how that could do. And it worked out really well. And they all thought, oh my goodness, we all need to do something. It didn't last very long because they'd already gone back to their desks and forgotten about it like the next week or whatever. But then 6 months later, as naturally happens in banking, people start moving roles and they go from one bank to another bank. I started getting phone calls from the same kind of people who attended that one who are now at the other banks saying, oh, now we've got a senior leadership offsite and we were looking for speakers to come. So I ended up giving like the same talk to 3 or 4 of the large banks just because they'd all been to the first one and then they'd moved jobs to the new bank. So I was just kind of doing this like offside circuit. It's basically like scaring them with the same thing. Basically like saying, if you're the Titanic, what's the iceberg, right? And just trying to describe several different icebergs that might sink their ship. But that kind of worked really well just because it was like voice of word of mouth through natural people moving around different roles in banks. So that was kind of my measure of success, is generally being asked back to give the same talk somewhere else.
That's kind of funny. I usually get asked to not scare people too much. So you get Chris if you really want to frighten people, but if you're a little nervous, you can bring me in.
You choose your level of scare.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. I think we've got time for one more question here. And just if anyone's listening to this on demand later and you've got a question, feel free just to email us here at Analytica and or reach out to these guys directly. They've got their Twitter profiles on the slide. I'll just put that back up again actually. I'm sure you guys won't mind people just ask you questions direct. Oops, there we are. So feel free to ask these guys questions via LinkedIn or Twitter later. But this last question there, so what time frame should I think about when writing a brief? Is it worth trying to define a desire for a longer term partnership with the influencer? Presumably that's maybe kind of more loose kind of ongoing engagement. So who wants to kick off with that one?
Yeah, I think for me, if somebody approached me cold and said, hey, we want to engage, get into like a 6 to 12 month partnership and do this, and this, I'd say, well, let's just do our first engagement, see how we work well together, see if there is a mutual value exchange here, and if we like it, then we can both mutually decide to move forward to a longer term partnership. So I think that partnership bit is it needs to come after the first engagement. Let's just start off and do some live Twitter chat, or let's do a sponsored article, or let's do an event together, and then we can, if that works out well and we both see that there's a value exchange, then let's move forward to a partnership. But don't spend too much time trying to define a long-term relationship with an influencer before you've been on the first date.
Yeah. I would completely agree, and I like the way Chris described it as well. I think I described this internally at Barclays, that it was, think of it like a marriage. This is relationship where you don't rush into it as the influencer. You go on your first date, you have a coffee, you might go to the cinema, and gradually you go for a nicer dinner and so on and so forth, and eventually as that relationship becomes loyal, it moves to different steps in the relationship, and then you can enter into bigger agreements and bigger partnerships. But that initial first date, I think, needs to be something fairly light to see that you work well together. Definitely, and then see how it blossoms into a corporate influencer romance.
And the influencer's got the right level of scare factor.
That too, yes.
Liz, anything to add to that one?
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree with both the Chris's.
Great. Well, I think that's our hour. Normally trying to keep things tight on the time at the end, so that's been great. Loads of really useful tips and insights, guys. We'll certainly be sharing this with anyone who needs help with planning an influence engagement strategy and writing briefs. Thank you, Chris, and Liz. It's been great having you. I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Just finally, if anyone listening,
have a great
put
evening.
feedback on the when you shut the Bright Talk panel down, it'll ask you for feedback. So just let us know what you thought of the session and any other topics you'd like us to cover. Thanks. Bye bye, guys.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.